Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat, is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Northwest Internship Coordinator Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our show...
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie. I'm the Senior Diversity Coordinator at the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thank you, Jessie, for joining us today. We're very happy to have you on our show.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's see here where to start. First of all, could you kind of tell us how you found Northwest? What was your journey to get here?
So I was in the application process, right? And so I used higher ed as my search engine. And so Northwest came up, and because previously I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, I was like, hey, this is relatively nearby. I should probably apply and then see how it goes. So that's how that happened.
So you applied through higher ed jobs, or?
So that's where I saw the posting. And then I had to come to the university website to actually start the application process. Mm-hmm.
So what were you doing in Lincoln? Were you working at the university there, or?
So I moved to Lincoln in 2016 for my doctoral studies. Yeah, so that's what I was doing over there. And I was part of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion over there. So that started about 3 years ago. So I was right there when it all started. And so I think that experience kind of laid the foundation to apply for DI related jobs.
Okay, so what is your PhD in, and what kind of DI work were you doing there before you came over to Northwest?
So my PhD work is related to marginalized women's access to education, right? Especially certain populations. Like for India, there's like caste driven discrimination and things like that. So trying to break that cycle and make sure that they get into an education system and see how education affects their life trajectories. So that is what my doctoral studies is on. With the DI work, I was very much involved with the education piece of it. So conducting classes, having guest speakers. We even started a group discussion where it's think, grow, and belong. I'm probably messing up the order right now, but it's a place where we brought people who are locally present with different areas of expertise, right? So that we could learn from them. Like we would have Native American professors come there and speak to us about their struggles or what it meant to go to a boarding school and things like that, or what does the research say. So I think very much involved in the education side of things. Mm-hmm.
So is that what you do as the senior coordinator now? So can you kind of give us an overview of your job here at Northwest?
Yes. So my job at Northwest is like super interesting, right? And I love the combination of the things that I get to do because I'm in this unique position where I get to work with employees and with students. And so my focus is pretty much like education, programming, and training for everybody who's in the campus and community. So I get to interact with a lot of people across age groups, and but you're absolutely right. Education is a big part of what I do. I also work with like the evaluation piece of it. So one of the things that we're doing is the IDI, which is like the Intercultural Development Inventory, and trying to see if that's like a good fit for our campus or not. And things like that.
What is the IDI? Could you explain that a little more?
So the IDI is about like a 10-minute survey. And what it does is it tries to identify intercultural competency, right? And it's validated and reliable across multiple cultures. And so this kind of helps us see where we perceive ourselves to be, and that's called the perceived orientation. And then it tells you actually where you are, which is the developmental orientation. And then it tells you what the gap is and then it tells you, hey, what are the things you could do to move across this continuum? Because the way it sees intercultural competency is not like, hey, this is a destination or you're either competent or not, but more so that it's a continuum and this is where you lie on it. And it's like a lifelong journey of learning and improving.
Has diversity and inclusion been an interest for you for a long time? What's your undergrad background in? You mentioned, your PhD work, but what was your original degree when you first went to college?
So my bachelor's is psychology and my master's is in counseling psychology. So I've always been interested in DI work, just that at that time I didn't know it was called DI work,
Right.
if that makes sense. So my master's thesis was also to look at that time this was the title, and it might seem inappropriate right now to name it that way, was relationship satisfaction among heterosexual and homosexual men. So even at that point, like having that as a topic in India was like, um, it was taboo, like nobody spoke about things like that. So even trying to find the people who are willing to speak to me about what their relationships look like, right? And trying to see things that needed to be changed for them, because only in 2018 did it even become legal in India to have like a same-sex marriage. And this was before then. So yep, I would very much say that I've been inclined with DI related stuff, but at the time just didn't know that this is what it fell under. Yeah.
What made you want to pursue a PhD in this area? I mean, I understand, doing DI work and how that could be, very fulfilling in educating people. But why the PhD?
So I got my master's in counseling psychology and I was working as a school counselor, right? And at that time, I was interacting a lot with parents and their children, and also working with teachers and other staff members. And one thing I realized was that I needed to bring about more like educational stuff, right, across, and we needed to have more training with parents, more training, like get them more involved in conversations. And typically what it would be was like, I'm a parent, you're a child, I say you do, right? So there was no room for open conversation. And so I felt the need to pursue higher education so that I could equip myself so that I'm able to facilitate those conversations. And that's kind of what led to the PhD, because what I do is, what are these conversations that people have at home, right? How do parents talk about education? Like, is that something that they prioritize versus like, just, hey, find any job as long as you're able to support yourself? But what is the long-term goal? Like, where do they see themselves in 20 years and things like that? So that's the piece that intrigued me. And so that's what made me follow it.
That's a fascinating tie-in with the IDI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Growth opportunities and
Mm-hmm.
intercultural competence, and then, mindset about those growth opportunities, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So what kinds of programs are you working on now? What are you providing through DI? What are your favorite things to do?
Oh wow. So this is my first semester on campus with students, right? So I would say that this is very much like a learning phase for me, because I'm trying to understand the how the campus works, how do we put across programming and things like that. So one of the things that I've loved working on is to put in Heritage Month resources on the ODI website. And I've had student workers in the office help me with each one of them, right? And it's been a good learning experience because we're providing those resources for everybody. We're trying to identify the resources we already have on campus, where, for instance, like the library has been amazing because they give us a list of books that are, for that month. For instance, for Hispanic Heritage Month, we highlighted Hispanic authors, Hispanic stories, and movies list that we have that people could lend. I mean, lend, right? Or borrow. I don't know. Borrow, yes, because they're getting it from the library. So things like that. And then we were able to like work with them across this 3 months that we've had, and kind of develop that, resources bank, and then identify that, hey, you know what, these are probably missing parts. We probably don't have as many movies with us on these topics, or more recent ones, or more like older ones, or documentary type ones. And that's helped us like improve that resource bank as well. So that's one of the things I enjoy doing. Even like with celebrating the history months, kind of like having those discussions with students. I think that's one thing that I always look forward to, because I want to know how people are thinking, why they're thinking what they're thinking, and what makes them think that way, and how do they want to grow from that point, right? Like, and I'm always interested to have a conversation. So and I like, even when I take class, I've taken a few like classes or like education opportunities that I could get. Okay, now I'm fumbling. uh so this is probably all the part
No
that you'll have
worries.
to edit, Travis. uh that I've said, hey, you get out of it as much as you put into it, right? Because there's so much that you can talk about, but you kind of have to come with questions that matter to you. And that's how learning happens. Like, I could come here and talk about so much, but if that's not important to you, or that's not relevant to you, it doesn't matter. But if something bothers you, let's talk about that, because then we can build on that, and the learning is like continuous, right? Otherwise, it's like, oh, this was amazing, and then it just fizzles out.
You guys also have an awesome new space over in the student union where you have,
Ooh.
hangout space for students. You want to tell us a little bit about that? I can superimpose some of the pictures of it on the
Oh,
screen as you
yeah.
talk too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, when you enter the space, you have right in the front, you have like a docking section, and then on the right, you have like a learning section. So that's kind of like, we like to think that's the quiet area, right? It's not quiet all the time, but and then we have a conference room which is open for everybody to use, and you could reserve the space. If you wanted to have a study group, or if you wanted to have a group meeting. It's pretty cool. It has the owl in there, so it's like, it's kind of creepy because it identifies where the sound's coming from and follows you. But it's also kind of cool where you have to like pull up a document and like work on it and things like that. And then we have the lounge space, which is where students just come and hang out with each other. They do homework. There's usually something playing on the TV, so it's like, it's alive, I think. And that's where sometimes when they have to do like their projects or things like that, they come, they brainstorm about things, they help each other out. They sometimes have study sessions over there too. um, and they have lunch together and things like that. So as coordinators, Brittany and I get to like hang out with them on a regular basis, not just hang out, I would say interact, right? And sometimes it's, I wouldn't say sometimes, on a daily basis, I think we have conversations that we might not have had otherwise. Like, hey, why is this the way it is? Like, watch a movie and start questioning, like, why is it that this is what happened versus this? Like, what are they trying to show us? And things like that. And we get talking. So yeah, so this is a wonderful place. I would suggest everybody to come and have lunch here, but yeah, and have conversations. So
What are the conversations that are happening? Are there, can you give us some overview?
do you mean like conversations with students?
I mean, like, yeah, conversations in general, not
Mhm.
particular conversations, but what are students interested in talking about these days, right? I mean, and we know we work in higher ed, like
Mhm.
students always kind of have similar, they're in a similar developmental kind of
Mhm.
place, and they have lots of conversations about things that are meaningful to them.
Mhm.
But what in the DI kind of world are you talking about on a daily basis?
So I would say one of the regular conversations we've had is about the book club that we used this semester. So that was Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy by Emmanuel Acho, right? And I think that brought about really good discussions because we spoke about what it means to grow up as a Black person in the US, and how you're viewed across, um, you know, different age groups, right? And things like, how do people respond to you, or what are the expectations, or what are some things that others think is okay, but for you it's like, No, it's not. It's like a solid no, right? Like there's no gray area over there. We speak about cultural appropriation quite a bit, about acknowledging that, hey, you know what, we are like a global village, but we do still need to acknowledge that, hey, this might not be part of where I'm from, but this is something else, and I'm borrowing it because I like it and I appreciate it. But how much does it get acknowledged? Like, do you give credit where credit is due, or do you just take it, use it, and benefit out of it? We talk about how um, sometimes it might be used inappropriately or being offensive, right? And then how that affects people. Like, what does it mean to be offended by something? Like, does this mean you're being overly sensitive? Like, always trying to know what is the history behind something. Like, where did this stem from? Like we say words, but words mean something, right? They have the power to make or break a person. And so, how do we choose our words carefully and things like that? So,
What would you say on campus for those safer career services?
mhm.
What can we do to help make those types of conversations safe in our spaces as well? We have a very diverse student team, for example.
Mhm. Mhm.
What are some good practices for supporting DI in our spaces?
So, and this might be something that gives room to more conversation, right? But in one of my recent discussions, the student brought up that, hey, what does it mean, like when I apply and then it has a white name versus a black name, right? Does that have any impact on me getting a job? Or how does that have an impact? Or if I identify as a man or a woman or as a transgender person, what does that mean for me? And then they were trying to talk about like how organizations have anti-discriminatory clauses, but they're like, how is this actually reinforced, right? Or how do I know if I'm being treated a particular way because of one of my identities? And I think that would be a good conversation to have in career services, because we know research tells us that, hey, if you apply with a white name, the chances of you being called back for an interview are greater than if you have something that's different, right, from a different culture. So how can we work through that? And what could students do to prepare themselves when things like that happen? Or how can they maximize that opportunity to either leverage their voice for others, or kind of like, hey, I'm given this chance, I'm going to be stellar, and I'm going to prove that this opens doors for more people, right, and change that narrative. So I think that would be something to look into.
So one of the things we've had several DI office members on the podcast. We had Dr.
Mhm.
Mallet last season.
Mhm.
We've had Brittany Roberts on there before.
Mhm.
So we'll link to those, of course. But one of the
Okay.
things I think is really amazing about the DI office on the Northwest campus, you're a
Mhm.
very small staff. You're even smaller than our
Mhm.
staff, and you
Mhm.
guys have kind of been charged with changing the culture of the institution. So no
Mhm.
big deal. Just if you could wrap that up by 5 o'clock on Friday, that'd be great. So can you tell us about how you are going about that? You're a small
Okay.
team. You have
Okay.
this giant task to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
How are you tackling that?
So I think the answer is in the question, right? The idea that the three of us are responsible for this is inaccurate. I think we're all responsible for this. And I think when with that mindset, if we just act more consciously with everything we do, it might be Dr. Mallet, Brittany, and I probably like putting the programming together, like creating these opportunities where students have a safe space to talk about things, where employees get together to talk about different things, right? Because our issues or our things of concerns are different. But everybody is a stakeholder and everybody has a part to play. And so with I think that mindset needs to change a little bit to move to that, hey, I can make a difference. I can make campus more inclusive. I can make my friend feel better in class. I could use more inclusive language, or I could be mindful of the things that I do. That would bring about the change.
Consistently, I think,
Mhm.
right? I think we've kind of seen in here that, one of the big keys is that in creating that safe space is it has to be consistently safe. Your
Right.
inclusive language has to be something that you're growing,
Mhm.
through and you're consistently
Mhm.
using.
Right. And I think that might kind of like stress out some people because they're like, "Oh my God, what if I say the wrong thing? Or what if I offend somebody?" And I think we should be okay with making mistakes. It's the thing, how do we rectify that, right? So we all make mistakes while we're learning something new, right? Be it math, be it music, be it singing, whatever you're doing, right? Because we're trying to be good at it and it requires constant practice. So we should get comfortable with the idea that, hey, I'm going to make a mistake. But if I make a mistake, I'll own up to it and I'll change and try to learn so that the next time maybe the mistake is not as big or I'm improving or, so I think that, again, going back to the growth and learning mindset, right?
And I think holding each other accountable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe you can correct me on this, but part of having DI as an arm or
Mm-hmm.
a branch, right, is to be able to hold each other. And I'm not talking about you all and us, maybe necessarily, but for
Mm-hmm.
all of us to know that we're here to hold each other accountable for being inclusive, right? I know that I can
Right.
come to you and say, Jessie, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm making mistakes. What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
I need you to hold me accountable for that. And
Mm-hmm.
vice versa, right? To be comfortable
Right.
with that type of relationship across all departments on campus.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. Because if I had to come in and talk to like an agricultural department about how to do agriculture, they'd be like, "We don't even know you. Like, why are you saying this?" But if it's one among them who identifies, "Hey, this is what we do every day, and I think this is how we need to change it," it's more relatable. It's more understanding, and it's like, "Oh, this person knows exactly what I'm doing, and then this is relevant to me," right? So I think you're absolutely right. Like we need allies and advocates in everywhere. Like, yeah. To kind of like, keep people and keep pushing that needle. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious. I'm always curious. We usually talk about what's been done, like what you're
Mhm.
doing or what's happened. What do you want to? Where do you want us to be? Where do you hope that we are a year from now, or a semester from now, or where do you want us to be in the future? And I think we don't talk about that enough. It's always like
Mhm.
what's been done or what's being done, not what we hope
Right.
happens.
Hmm. So I think some of the things that we're looking at is for cross-cultural learning, right? And so I have like a special passion for this because as an international student and as an international employee right now, I think there needs to be learning across cultures. It's just not that I understand how the system works, but I want the people over here also to understand what my life looks like and what my values and beliefs are, right? And to have like, hey, we could differ in these values and beliefs, but we can still coexist and live together and have this atmosphere of inclusive excellence, right? Because it doesn't mean that you have to what am I trying to say over here? Like put down one person over the other to make a point that, hey, no, this is, I can only shine, you cannot, or yeah. So I think one of the things I'd like to see is have cross-cultural learning where people are able to take the time to learn about others' values and beliefs and then kind of like have like an understanding and respect for it.
An appreciation, right?
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
I think the respect is foundational as well. But I think of all the things that the international students in our office bring
Mm-hmm.
to like things we were totally not aware of until they came into our space, right? And
Mm-hmm.
were
Mm-hmm.
were kind enough to share with us. And just the way that we can appreciate what they bring in even more now that we're aware of it. You
Right.
can't
Mm-hmm.
appreciate something you're not aware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely. Like, and I think that goes even with the domestic underrepresented population, right? Because the graduation rate is different, the success rate is different, and we're trying to build a system of equity. So how we're going to look at the resources or the things or collaborations that we need to make in order to like bridge that gap. So um, definitely looking across like different identities and and how that affects people, especially in education. Yeah, that would definitely be key.
where are you originally from in India?
Mm-hmm.
And what is a major difference? Maybe you could speak to a major difference in culture
Mm-hmm.
between American culture and Indian culture, or something that
Ooh.
surprised you, or I'm sure there are lots of differences, but
Yeah. So I am from the southern part of India. It's in the state of Tamil Nadu. So Tamil is the language we speak, and Nadu means the land of so the land of Tamil speaking people. That makes sense. And so I'm in the capital city, Chennai. And so Tamil is one of the languages that came from, it's one of the oldest languages. And I would say one of the biggest differences is the weather that I feel. And I know this is not true. I cannot think of all of America when I'm talking about this, right? But so one of the changes that I see was because Chennai is like a coastal city, and so we have the second longest beach, and the weather's always like humid and tropical. And then when I moved to the Midwest, I moved in Jan, so I was not prepared at all. I had no idea. I came here with a few sweaters, thinking that would be enough. Clearly no. So that was like the first shock for me. Um, and then I think the second thing that I had to learn was to use more technology with work as compared to more like in-person things, or like even like with teaching material, things like that. We'd have more handouts in paper than like, hey, go online and check on um Canvas. I've said this quite often. So the first day that I went for class, there was already like a pre-reading assigned for us, and the professor said, "Hey, the reading's already on Blackboard. That's what we used before Canvas." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I told her, "Hey, I just came. I didn't see this. I'll catch up, right?" So after class, I walked around the department trying to find the Blackboard, because my frame of reference was a blackboard with white chalk on it. Um, and so that was just funny. And one of my seniors was like, "Why are you walking around? Like, what are you looking for?" I'm like, "I'm looking for this big blackboard where all the readings and homeworks are put up, right?" And she's like, "Okay, Jessie, sit down. Let's open your laptop and let me show you, right?" So it's like even words which meant different things to me meant different over here. Um, and so I think that was all like part of the learning. Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, so first commentary on the Midwest weather. Yes.
Mhm.
She is fickle.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like even during the day, right? Morning it's one weather, after it's something else, and evening you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, I had an international student as a roommate, and we went through our whole first semester of living together was kind of developing our own kind of language, right?
Mhm.
Because she would say things and we would be like, we do not know what you're talking about. And she would,
Mhm.
she's like, I'm sure this is the word. She was
Right.
using the word
Uh-huh.
heel,
Mhm.
my grandmother's heels. And we were like, I don't know about your grandmother and her heels. Like, I don't really know what's going on here. But she was saying hills. It was
Mhm.
just that her accent was like turning it to heels, and we didn't have
Mhm.
enough context to figure out
Mhm.
what she was saying.
Mhm.
But I think, that is one to kind of turn the conversation back around. That
Mhm.
is one thing that I love about Northwest. That is one of my favorite things about Northwest is that we're in the middle of fickle Missouri weather, a
Mhm.
rural place, right? Someplace we're 2 hours from any large city,
Mhm.
but we have people from India. We
Mhm.
have my roommate was from Ukraine. Our graduate assistant is from
Mhm.
Brazil. We have
Mhm.
students in our office from Nigeria, from
Mhm.
Kansas City, from Chicago, from Florida.
Mhm.
To be able to, that is a true privilege to me,
Mhm.
right? To be able to come to campus and to be able to talk to people from all over the globe. And I think that's
True.
truly one of my favorite things about being here.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Like you wouldn't think you would meet all these different people over here, and you're like, wow, okay.
Any last words, thoughts for us?
No. Yeah.
I feel
I
like
think we spoke quite a bit.
the sun is coming in my window, and it's
Okay.
hard for me to kind of avoid it at this point. So,
Yeah.
all
So
right.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jessie. It has
Mhm.
been a pleasure to chat with you. And I was in your office yesterday, and it is an amazing space over there in DI, and I would encourage everyone to go check it out.
Thank you so much for taking the time and giving me this opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that will do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget that you can find the audio version of the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. New episodes come out every Friday, and you can connect with us on social media on both Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for joining us for Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time.